would you be so kind as to push the little white box to make it go away, one of you?
Sure.
And you guys want floor chairs? That's Amini and Arjun, right? Yes. Okay. So Jessica is new. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Sophia.
I'm Trevor. I'm Benai.
Uma. Jessica.
Arjun.
Um,
And I'm Jim. And then we have all the folks in Zoom land. So if you wish to follow along, I have only 2 more copies of the book out. Does anyone want them? Okay. So Deepa, where are we in our text?
We are in verse 24. Can I make an admin type request first?
Certainly.
So I know that Shweta dials into the Bhagwad Geeta class on Sundays. It might be worth it to send out an email for those who dial in from India that the timing has changed. I think she might have missed today's class because it's currently 7:30 in India, but she usually is used to signing in at 8 a.m.
Yes, yes. I'm not sure. I don't know whether I have Uday's. I don't know whether I have Shweta's.
I have her. Let me send her a message.
Okay.
And I'll
Thank-
post to the WhatsApp group too. I'll post to the WhatsApp group.
Great, great. That's good. That's good. So we're on verse 24 in chapter 13. So chapter 13 is the field and the knower of the field, Kshetra, Kshetranya cha. And we're now in kind of a liminal place as we're moving our way into the 14th chapter, which is the yoga of the 3 gunas. So will you help us out here, Deepa, with the next verse?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Ya evam veti purusham prakritim cha gune saha sarvatha vartamanopi nasabhuyo bhijayate. He who thus knows the Purusha and Prakriti together with the qualities, in whatsoever condition he may be, he is not born again.
Yes. So what is it we need to know? What is Prakriti? The whole phenomenal world and your physical body. The subtle world of thoughts and feelings and your own thoughts and feelings. Energy, feel energies. That's all in the world of Prakriti. And even our ignorance, that's in the world of Prakriti. Kshetra. Who am I? Chid Akasha, the space of consciousness, of awareness alone. And last week we had our introduction to the 3 gunas. Gunas are pun in Sanskrit. It means qualities. We think of them as the qualities of mind or of nature. But it also could mean ropes. So we're bound up by the qualities of the mind like we're bound with ropes. Ha ha ha. That's the joke. Anyway, so what are the 3 gunas? Who can remember? We went through them briefly last week.
Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas.
And what is the meaning of sattva?
Like equanimity or purity and
Clarity.
And Rajas.
Non-activity.
And Rajas is activity, and Tamas is inactivity or inertia.
Yes. And in Rajas, activity, that's where all our suffering happens. It's characterized by what we call Vikshepa Shakti. The root here is Kshipati, which means to throw or hurl like a spear. So the mind goes out. I want this, I don't like that, competition, jealousy, comparison, ambition, all that stuff, and the accompanying emotional states, fear, anger, annoyance, restlessness, irritability, discontent. None of you have any of those qualities, do you? That's the Rajasic mind. Tamas, inactivity, indolence, illusion and delusion. Pure tamas is deep sleep. And what Krishna is saying here is the mind is always circling through the gunas. So Monday is a very important day. Everybody know what Monday is? Pi Day. It's 3.14. So we will use a piece of pie as our comparison. So I want pie on Pie Day. I want apple pie. Do I want to make a quiche? Someone was telling me about an asparagus pie, which sounds interesting. Pumpkin pie. What kind of pie am I going to get? Desire. Rajas. Go Whole Foods. Probably get their chocolate cream cheese pie. Cut a piece of the chocolate cream cheese pie. Oh, that's really good pie. When desire and object of desire become one, for a moment the mind is quiet. Sattva. And if I eat the whole piece of pie, what's next? Tamas. And the mind comes out and I'm going, more pie. Chocolates. Lassi. Some other desire. So Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. And what we want to do is stand back and be in the viewpoint of the unattached witness. Meditation is called Sakshi Bhava, the feeling or the attitude of the witness. You just watch it. Now, I have news for you all. The spiritual life does not mean that you hit all the green lights of life. If you think, if I just meditate enough, I'm going to have lots of money, I'm going to get the perfect spouse, I'm going to get the great job, and I'll certainly hit all the green lights on my way to satsang. Not going to happen. Each of us gets our allotted dose of successes and failures, conducive and non-conducive environments, all based on the force of the past. Listen carefully. When the situation is conducive, the mind is happy. When the situation is non-conducive, the mind is unhappy. But you can get out of the whole syndrome by just watching. Someone used to say, shut up and get out. But what he meant was quiet the mind. Get out of the mind. Let the play of the gunas happen. Don't get involved. Now, actually, we have what appears to be a contradiction. Because Krishna will also say, and ever remain in the sattvic state. Sattva is when the mind is the happiest, when we're clear, cheerful, not driven by anxiety or ambition or comparison. Let go, wear life like a loose garment. So it really isn't a circle, it's a spiral. The more we let go, the more of the worries of life drop away. Swami Tejomayananda used to say, you know how you get rid of all your worries? Stop worrying. We think the world causes my mind states. Yoga says, no. My habituated mind states determine how I see the world. In the end, sarvam kalvidam dhamma. Sarvam idam, all this. Kalu, verily, is Brahman. It's all God in the end. So the person who knows they are the witnessing consciousness and is identified with that, who sees the impermanence of the world, who knows the mind will just simply play through the gunas, doesn't get worked up over it. And the volume level, the whole drama comes way, way down.
Jim, may I ask a question?
Certainly.
So a practical question and then also a spiritual question. Practically speaking, for example, all day today, I've been thinking about a meeting I have tomorrow and I feel anxious about it and so on, but I know I should drop it, but I can't stop thinking about it.
Mhm.
So what should I do?
Make it a cup of tea and put it in the corner.
So
Just
does that
don't
mean
believe it.
prepare for it and work on it?
Sure, of course
or-
you should prepare for it. It's your duty.
Okay, but how can I put it in the corner?
But when you've prepared for it, by the way, worrying is not preparation. Do you see that?
Yes.
Worrying is a different practice. Preparing is something appropriate. If you have a meeting, it's appropriate to prepare for the meeting. Do your best. But we get these ideas that are helpful. First of all, your employer is God. Who do you work for?
A startup.
Yeah, you think you work for a startup. Really work for God. So make it sacred. This preparation is your oblation. Now, in a Hindu home, traditional Hindu home, let's see, we have a mother here. Umaji, when you make dinner for the family and you finish, what do you do with the food before you put it on the table?
Bring it near to the God.
Yes. You always serve the God first. And actually, when it goes on the table, that's called prasad. Prasad is the remnant of the sacrifice. So your work is for God. And if other people get value, like Vinayak gets a decent meal, that's prasad. If they like what you do, prasad. If Vinayak likes his mother's cooking, oh, mommy, that's such good food, prasad. You're doing it always for God.
But what if it doesn't go well?
It's egg on God's face, not yours.
So Okay, and my other question was around the quote which said, if so and so, then you will not be born again.
All right. So, what is it that's born? We've gone through this before, but let's review it. The fundamental teaching of yoga, the fundamental teaching of Vedanta is the doctrine of ajati. Ajati means unborn. The truth is, the self in you is never born. It cannot die. So what is born? What is it that reincarnates? So the classic example is what we call a gata, a pot or a kumbha. We don't have one, so we'll have to use the water glass. The glass itself is like the physical body. We have what's called an antakarana, an inner equipment, which sometimes is called the transmigrating soul. It has our sense perceptions, it has prana, it has the mind, it has the intellect, it has the ego sense, and the seeds of the vasanas, the inherent proclivities. So if I were to take a glass of water, let's say it has a crack and it starts to leak. Oh, okay, so I pour the water into another glass. That's what like reincarnation is like. So if, and why do we end up getting born again? The physical body is essentially an instrument for the fulfillment of desire, to garner experience. As long as I'm under the mindset, I'll be happy when, it'll be better if, well, that didn't work out too well, maybe I'll try another project. You know, if only I'd been a sumo wrestler, it would have been better if I'd been a Russian ballerina. We have all these ideas, more, better, different, more, better, different. We read in the scriptures all these stories that, you know, some Brahmin is looking out the window and he's poor and he sees a king go by. Gee, it would have been so much better if I'd been a king. So then he gets to be born again as a king, and da, 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 da. That's what happens. Now, you don't have to believe in the doctrine of reincarnation. I have a student who lived in Chicago, and she was thinking, oh, it'll be so much better if I move to California. She moves to California, and she was dissatisfied in California. So she's thinking, oh, I should have go back to Chicago. It'll be better there. Guess what? She calls me up. It's just different. It's just different. So if you look to your own life experience, has any change in environment solved the problem of what I call divine discontent? We have a God-shaped hole in our hearts. And no person, place, job, thing, condition can fill it up. It's just too little. But it can take a long time to figure that out. Now, yourself is like the space in the glass. So, what's the difference between the space in the glass and the room space? I'm going to do my magic trick. You see the space in the glass there? Did I move space? Did I?
No. You move the glass.
The glass is in space, but the space in the glass, the space in the room, they're untouched by it. So you are not in the body. You are not in the subtle body. They are in you. Best way to understand this is to go to the dream state. So in the dream state, you create a dream body, and from that dream body, you have a locus of perception. In other words, you view the dream from that body. Not always. Sometimes we have an omnipresent view from above, but most of the time in the dream, I'm identified with the dream body. I have a dream ego. I am this dream body. I see a world out there. And I have all this stuff I do. And I have thoughts and feelings inside. But do you incarnate into the dream? Sure feels like it. When you're dreaming, it doesn't feel any different than what you're experiencing right now, sitting in my living room. Does it? To the dreamer ego, the dream seems real. The unreality of the dream is only evident when it's negated by waking up. Is that making sense? This is no different. This is like a very long, very vivid dream. So you are untouched by the dream of this world. So we have to understand when the scriptures say they are not born again. You can look at it two ways. The cause of the subtle body being born, well, because the compulsions, the desires are gone. But more importantly, the woman of realization has the direct experience. I was never born in the first place. I was just an illusion. That's the deepest teaching. Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, thank you.
It's a very deep and very profound question. Swamiji used to say reincarnation is the genealogy of the ghost in the post. The Purusha Sthanam. That's a classic Vedanta metaphor. So I'm walking down Grand Avenue and it's dark and the street light is out. And up ahead I go, uh-oh. There's this great big fellow who looks like he's about 6'5" and big as a house. And I bet he's mean. Is he gonna rob me and beat me? What should I do? Should I cross to the other side of the street? Should I go back home? But I'm a compassionate man. So I think, well, maybe he came from a difficult childhood. Maybe he had alcoholic parents. Maybe he was abused as a child. More than that, maybe his parents came from difficult circumstances. This could be generation. Who knows how far back this tragedy of poverty and prejudice may have gone on. Then a car comes down the street and there's nobody there. It was just a shadow. That, in the end, is reincarnation. I'm making this up. That's what the scriptures thunder. And why do we teach reincarnation? it is a useful teaching when people's minds are gross and they are firmly identified with the body or the body plus the subtle body. It is helpful, just like we are initially taught Newtonian physics. But if you go on and do graduate work in physics, you see, well, quantum physics or astrophysics, Newtonian physics, well, that's really not true. You know, it's useful at one level of our understanding. Does that make sense? Yes, no?
Could you repeat the last one?
So Newtonian physics is not the totality of reality of physics. If you study quantum physics or astrophysics, you see the laws are different. Time dilates, space-time is curved. That's not what Newton said. But Newtonian physics is useful for most of us in our day-to-day lives. Likewise, the doctrine of reincarnation can be useful at one level of our spiritual unfolding. But in the end, the self is never born. It is changeless. It never dies. It is ajati, unborn. Deep subject. We'll touch on it again. All right. Any other questions before we go on? How are you doing with this, Jessica?
Well, I have a question. My mind has been very unhappy today. Lots of problems that I am working through in a relationship. And I hear what you said about the mind goes through the cycle, the three things, and we should be observers. So is it that my mind is I'm accessing myself that is not that is unborn, and I'm looking at the feelings that I'm feeling, and I'm observing them from a distance? Is that what I should be doing?
Well, let's look at it this way. How old are you now?
33.
Jim,
Okay.
can you repeat the question, please?
She's having difficulty with the relationship, and how should she look at it? Have you ever talked with maybe a cousin or a sister who's like 14 and maybe has their very first crush, and the boy doesn't talk to her the way she wants, and she's just heartbroken? But when you're in your 30s, you say, oh, I remember my first crush. You'll survive. But always when we're in it, it seems, oh, this is going to be the end of the world. It is. But the pain is because of attachment and expectation. And we can talk offline and after class if you wish. I don't want to go delving into your personal situation. But there are answers. There are answers. They're not necessarily easy, and that doesn't mean we're going to be able to put them into practice overnight. All right, next verse.
Verse 25. Dhyanenatmani pashyanti kechidatmanamaatmana anye samkhena yogena karma yogena chapare. Some by meditation, behold the self in the self by the self. Others by the yoga of knowledge, by Sankhya Yoga, and others by Karma Yoga.
So, the first thing, he's talking about various methods of practice that we can use. Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. We went into that in depth when we studied chapters 3, 4, and 5. Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. But his first statement here is for the subtlest and the most prepared of students. And the way we go at it is this. We're going to talk about what we call pramana, which means an authority or a means of knowledge. Our means of knowledge for everything in the world of phenomena is through what we call the triputi, the triple factor. I, through seeing, cognize the table. Knower, knowing, and known. Triple factor. I, through hearing, cognize the sound of the traffic. Knower, knowing, and known. I can go through all the 5 outer senses that way. But it's true about the subtle world as well. I, through manas, mind, cognize feelings. I, through buddhi, intellect, cognize thoughts. How do you know you are you? Do you exist? Anybody here not exist? Do we have any shunyavadins, scholiasts of the void here? I think everybody exists. How do you know it? I do not mean, well, I can poke myself. That's your body. And your body is an object of cognition. It's not the essential you. How do you know you are you? You do not see, hear, taste, touch, smell, emote, or think yourself. You can think the thought, oh, I exist. That doesn't bring you into existence. How do you know you are you? I don't know, I just know it. That's right. What is the means of knowledge? The pramana. The self itself is the means of knowledge. You are swayambhu, self-evident. What is the object of knowledge? Well, yourself is not an object, though it is that which is known. But you don't know yourself like you know an object, yet you are not unknown. You are swayam jyoti, self-luminous, self-effulgent. It is the self who knows the self. Now listen carefully. That is the only real knowledge. By real, I mean with a capital R. It's always there. It does not change. Achalam, it never moves. Nirmalam has no taint, no dirt. Nirupaham, it has no form. Vigunaihi, beyond the three gunas. Don't believe me? Look. Now, in the beginning of this work, we think the world is real. My relationship is real. My job is real. School is real. Work is real. God, mystery. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Actually, it's the other way around. The scriptures thunder, I am Atma Brahma. This self is what God is. And it's the only thing you will ever know absolutely. Everything else is the mystery. Everything else is the mind, which is like a phantasm, comprised of just images. It's imagination. It creates a world. Don't worry about the world. You don't need to figure it out. Good news is I, as an individual, am not in charge. Thank God. So, with this teaching in mind, read the first part of that shloka again, please, Deepa.
Sure. Some, by meditation, behold the self in the self by the self.
Yeah. So this is the subtlest and the deepest kind of meditation. Great sage Ramana Maharshi. He reduced all his teaching into one simple practice. Oham. Who am I? It's intense inquiry into my actual experience of I. Next verse.
Sorry, I was just messaging Shweta. She's just logging in. So verse 26.
Yes.
Anye tveva majanantah shrutavan yebhya upasate tepi chatittarantyeva mrityum shruti parayanah. Others also, not knowing this, worship, having heard of it from others. They too cross beyond death, if they would regard what they have heard as their supreme refuge.
So even those who may not yet have the subtlety of mind to enter into this non-dual knowledge, and instead think of God as other. Swamiji used to say, a personal God is as real as your ego. If you are identified as a person, I think I'm a person. I think my wife is a person. I think my husband is a person. I think my children are persons. Those are real to you. God is as real as any of them. And Jews have a wonderful way to say it. What is the first and greatest commandment? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and mind and strength. That works. So if we are identified, we have Jiva Bhavana, and we're in trouble especially. Hang on to the feet of God. As you understand God, it doesn't matter what name you use or what form you're attracted to. It doesn't matter in the least. Krishna says, my devotee is never destroyed. You don't attain self-realization in this lifetime, you come back. You take your yoga with you. Can't take your money, can't take your relationships, can't take your house with you, but you do take your yoga with you. Pick up where you left off. Any thoughts on this?
Maybe
Yes.
good to clarify that by yoga you mean the union between the mind and the non-mind. Is that right?
I'm not sure I'd call it non-mind,
Okay.
but yoga is the yoking of the mind and the self. That's yoga means union, means yoking. It's not just what you do at the gymnasium. That's a very, very small part of the science of yoga. And you'll see in this particular scripture, every single chapter is called the yoga of blah, 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 blah. This is the yoga of the field and the knower of the field. That's the title of this chapter. So these are all various practices we can do. One of the big difference between Western religions and Eastern religions, like Buddhism and real Hinduism, is the Western religions frequently say, this is an article of faith. If you believe in this and do these behavioral things, then after you die, you'll be saved, you'll go to heaven. In yoga, it is all empirical. We are given hypotheses, and we need to be spiritual scientists. Prove or disprove in the laboratory of your own direct experience. Do this practice, see what happens. That's what we're always about. Very way. Always based, a philosophy comes out of experience, not the other way around. All right, next verse.
Verse 27.
I'm sorry.
It's verse 27.
Okay.
Yavat samjayate kinchit sattvam sthavara jangamam kshetra kshetrajna samyoga tadvidhi bharatarshabha. Wherever any being is born, the unmoving or the moving, know you, O best of the Bharatas, that it is from the union between the field and the knower of the field.
So what is it that brings beings into existence? It is this asparsha yoga. It's a term that Krishna will use elsewhere in the Gita. The root is prichati, which means to touch. So asparsha means untouched. Yoga means union. The touch of the untouched. Prakriti, matter, is inert. It is jada. Consciousness has no form, no motion, no nothing. But when consciousness enlivens matter, all this takes place. One of the oldest images of God we have in Hinduism is the Shiva Lingam. And it's usually set in what's actually, I mean, it has a spout on it for doing the ritual worship, but it's a yoni, it's a vagina. It is a penis in a vagina. And what does that mean? The whole world is nothing but Lord Shiva, pure consciousness, as it were inseminating Mother Shakti energy. From that, all this takes place. So beautiful, beautiful image. Shiva is always wedded to his Shakti. That is this world. Last verse, 28.
Who you remember?
Barely.
Oh, sorry. Sharing the wrong screen. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsva vinashyantam yapashyati sapashyati. He sees who sees the Supreme Lord existing equally in all beings, the unperishing within the perishing.
So the woman of realization, the woman who sees, is the one who sees the unperishing in the midst of the perishing, knowing that the entire phenomenal world is just vibration held together by thought, and that the material cause of it all is consciousness. Now, here's a little exercise for you. as you go about your life this week, look people right in the eye. Don't pay too much attention to their physical body or their feelings and beliefs or their ideas. They're there. Try not to get involved in that. Instead, look straight on through those eyes, which are magic holes in the fabric of space-time. Because a conscious being is looking out through those eyes. Also with your dog and your cat and your elephant or whatever it is. I mean, every sentient being. Easier. Maybe not, I don't know. But the being that's looking out of those eyes is God. Never forget that the being that's looking out of your own eyes is God. The self in you is not like the self in me. The self in you is the self in me. We have this word in the tradition called Kevala or Kaivalya, which means alone. There's a very famous Upanishad, the Kaivalya Upanishad, which is great instruction in meditation. It doesn't mean go off in the forest and be by yourself. It means you are truly alone because there's only one of us here. Just as an ego, you pervade your finger and your thumb and your knee and your toe. The same you is an ego that pervades every part of your body. Your finger doesn't do its own thing. Finger, come back, you don't do that. You pervade it all. So also the self, the real you, pervades all of this. That means Putin and Donald Trump too. You may not care for the form, but the conscious being looking out of those eyes is still Krishna. No one's left out. Very, very wonderful chapter. And thank you all for all the really good questions.
Jim, actually,
Yeah.
there's 7 more verses.
I thought there was only 28.
You know, I thought so too. I thought it was ending closer to the late 20s, but it goes on to 35.
Then let's keep going.
Okay.
I'm frequently quite wrong. Next one.
Okay, we're on 29. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram nahi nastyatmanatmanam tato yati parangatim. Indeed, he who sees the same Lord everywhere, equally dwelling, destroys not the self by the self. Therefore, he goes to the highest goal.
Yes. So the practice that we are invited to take on is called samadrishta, this equality of vision. So what do we want to do? Shankara will use a very famous metaphor. It's like pouring water through a wicker basket. I made some pasta this evening. So I have my little plastic colander and I have my pot full of pasta and the pasta water. And you go, whoosh, the water just pours through. When you're rinsing vegetables in a colander, water just pours through. So that's how we want our minds to be. We were talking earlier before class about other people's opinions. Remember? And the practice is positive or negative, let them through. Do not get involved with, attach to, or identify with opinions from other people. Let it pass through. If praise comes to you, let it pass through. Be polite. If someone pays you a compliment, you graciously say thank you. But don't let it land. Don't get involved with it. And when censure comes, notice I didn't say if. I said when. Let it pass through. Let it pass through. So if you're walking out in nature, this is a great place to practice this. You look at a flower, you look at a leaf, you look at a piece of paper on the ground. You see your dog, you see a person. See if you can be empty and have this incredible emptiness inside. Open-hearted, but empty. We want to love as God loves. And I have news for you. God has no taste. God loves people that you or I might have nothing to do with. So we need to learn to love as God loves. Total open-heartedness to all beings. Samadrishta. Saying to a sinner, a friend, or an enemy, only person, a beautiful person, someone whose politics you agree with, someone whose politics you disagree with. Still, we keep our hearts open. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
प्रकृत्यैव च कर्माणि क्रियमाणानि सर्वशः य पश्यति तथात्मान मकर्तारं स पश्यति. He sees who sees that all actions are performed by Prakriti alone and that the self is actionless.
Yes. So we give up this identification for ourselves and for everybody else. It's an individual doer. What is doing the doing? Guna and karma, the qualities of mind and the force of the past. What gets us in trouble is when I think I'm doing the doing. So I regret my past. Or I am so proud of my accomplishments. I'm so worried about the future because I'm the one who can be successful or screw up. Should I move here or should I move there? It's so important. It's going to affect me. Yogi drops all of that nonsense. You're going to do what you're going to do. One of the images I like, if you're up in the mountains where there's been snow in the spring and the snow starts to melt, imagine a little snow melt rivulet coming down, and there's a large boulder. Behind the boulder, the water starts to puddle. Now, will it go to the right or will it go to the left? Do you think the water can choose? Which side is it going to go to? The lowest one, the lower one. It's low. Whichever side's low, that's the side the water's going to go. Are you going to take this job or are you not going to take this job? Guna and karma, you're going to do what you're going to do. You will experience it as desire and choice, but it's really prakriti, nature. Your prarabdha karma, force of your past maturing, working its way out. And understand your happiness has nothing to do with the circumstances. Your happiness comes from the degree you can let go, not be attached. I heard someone come up with a good slogan. You have two choices in life: let go or be dragged. Lines of peace. So the yogi wears her life lightly. You did what you did because you could do no other. Doesn't mean we don't learn from the past. That's different than regretting the past. We don't worry about the future. There's an old military term: no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. The other one I like: man proposes, but God disposes. Yes.
So I think this particular thing you mentioned, I have.
Speak a little louder
Sorry.
here.
No, I have a really hard time with this, the whole letting go. I'm a bit of like a list maniac, and I have like a million things going and everything has to go kind of exactly how I list it. And I realize it's just me trying to control. But I have a hard time being as productive or getting everything done without it. I realize it's counterproductive to my practice, but I'm wondering, how do you still, I guess the answer you would say based on what you just said is you would automatically do it anyhow. So how do you kind of?
So you make your list with the sure knowledge that it's going to get screwed up. Is that what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with lists and plans. Just don't base your security or happiness on it. This is what you do. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure Arjun appreciates it quite a lot.
Actually, he hates it. It's the opposite. But I guess the anxiety that comes from
That's
it is
the
what,
issue, yeah.
yeah.
And that's a function, those of us who have control issues, it's a form of fear. And what happens deeply underneath, you may think God is omnipotent, but what you really believe is that God is an underachiever. Have you ever told you were an underachiever in school? I got that all the time. Oh, Jim, you're so smart. Why did you just get B pluses? You're an underachiever. So if I think God's an underachiever, then obviously he needs my help. So a good exercise, go out to the ocean and see how successful you are in making the waves not come to shore. See how successful you are in stopping the moon from going through its phases. How successful are you in planning the weather? But we have this vanity that I'm so powerful. And then of course we're not. And then when it doesn't turn out our way, and then we have this belief that if I just plan it, then I'll be happy, it'll be okay. And unfortunately, it's really the opposite. Now, I have some bad news for you. I'm 73, almost 74. I have had terrible control issues in my life. Now, but I'm a yogi, which means I don't believe them. But my joke now is I am a blind backseat driver with a poor sense of direction. My mind still does it. I should have turned left there. Would you like directions on how? No, I'm going to use Google Maps. And I just laugh at it. I just laugh at it. And run away. Now, another thing. Just because you have the impulse doesn't mean you have to speak or act on it. Did you all get that? Yes. Most of us don't realize that if I have a feeling, I just have to act on it. You don't have to act on it. You don't believe it, even though it keeps coming up. But another piece of this, in God's hands, our defects can become assets. So for the last 20 years of last 14 years of my working life, God made me a director of music. My job was to control everybody else. Yeah. And because I gave that to God, that particular dosha, God could use it.
Jim, could I share something that's quite relevant from the Vipassana retreat that I just came out of?
Certainly, go right ahead.
So on the control thing, basically what Vipassana does for people who may not be aware of it is you sit basically for 10, almost 11 hours per day. And the goal starting from day 4 is to not change your position for an hour or hour and a half, up to 2 hours at a time. And in the beginning, I mean, it was extremely painful for everybody. I mean, in terms of control and fear and planning, people were building pillow forts. I mean, it was just wild. You were trying to put yourself in every position. By a certain number of day though, like what I noticed was that no matter what position I put myself in, at a certain time there was going to be pain. And it was such a good metaphor for life because you just couldn't control the external circumstances. But if you sit through the quote unquote pain long enough, you realize that your mind is just lying to you. And neither the pain nor the good sensations, it was all exactly the same. It all came down to just physical, like it just came down to sensations, to vibrations. And then that's how you find this equanimity over a period of 10 days. If you practice every single session, which is what I really diligently tried to do, because you needed all those days of practice. And by the end, you realize that I was really just sitting for like an hour at a time and it didn't bother me at all. All the sensations that used to be quote unquote pain just became vibrational sensations. And it was amazing because I have a very low pain tolerance. So for me to go through all that, I was very worried. And I had such fear entering each sitting position. And I eventually lost that fear because you just realize that your mind's just
That's
lying to you.
excellent work, Fang. Excellent, excellent work. Excellent. Thank you. It's 8 o'clock, so we need to stop. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Shweta, are you online still?
Yes.
I